I'm 29, and I've chosen to live child-free. My younger sister Carlin is 27, and she has two little boys, one is 3.5, the other just turned 2. We live pretty close to each other, so I've basically been a part of their lives from the very beginning. She and I are all we have when it comes to family. We grew up in a home that was broken and dysfunctional, so we've always leaned on each other. I really do love those boys, but anyone who's been around toddlers knows they're a lot to handle, especially when I'm already juggling my own career, social commitments, and the personal reasons that made me decide I didn't want kids of my own. Right now, I help out with babysitting somewhere between 10 and 20 hours every week. And honestly, it's starting to drain me. The number of times she's needed me has been creeping up little by little, and for the last 7 months or so, it's just become the norm. At first, the reasons seemed harmless enough. Carlin was looking for part-time work, going to mandatory courses so she could qualify for unemployment, or occasionally going out for movie nights with her friends. I didn't mind helping then. But now, my free time is practically swallowed up at her house. Recently, her excuse has been that her best friend's mom is dying, and she needs to be there to support her. She's a single mom, and I understand how tough that is, but I can't shake the feeling that she's starting to use me. On top of that, my fiancé and I barely see each other as it is since we both work irregular shifts, and this situation makes it even worse. Sometimes when I can't watch the kids because I already have plans, Carlin will send me these guilt-tripping voice messages of the boys crying, saying they miss me. Along with that, she'll throw in comments like it's a shame I care more about myself than them, or how she would ask someone else if she had anyone else to ask. She'll even accuse me of being selfish for wanting to go on a simple date night while she's stuck choosing between her kids and her best friend's dying mother. If it stopped there, maybe I could deal with it. But it's bled into other things too. When I show up at her place, the house is often a wreck, there's no food around, and it just so happens to be bath night, or she'll casually mention I should pack a gym bag for one of the boys for the next day. It's like these extra chores are her way of punishing me. The first time it happened, I thought she'd be grateful I was stepping in where I could. I figured if I didn't have time to do everything, it wouldn't matter. I was wrong. Before she got home, she asked if I'd done all the extra stuff, and when I said no, not all of it, suddenly she needed to stay out a little later. That became a pattern. And embarrassingly, it took me too long to realize what she was doing. At the time, I was just glad she was even letting me know when she'd be back, because normally she never did. Another thing she does that feels like revenge, though maybe it's just me being tired, is that she doesn't prep meals for the boys or leave money for food. If I go to the store, she promises she'll pay me back, but sure enough, she guilts me into letting it slide. On top of that, she's backed out of things she's promised me, with the excuse that if I won't do exactly what she wants with the boys, then she doesn't feel like doing anything for me either. One example, I asked if I could borrow a dress for a wedding because I didn't want to buy one, and we've always swapped clothes back and forth. She agreed at first. But 4 days before the wedding, I couldn't drop by on short notice the way she demanded, and suddenly she told me I could forget about the dress because she needed it herself. I ended up panic buying one. Last month, she said she'd pick me up after I dropped my car off for maintenance. She never showed. I was stranded, and she didn't even answer her phone for 2.5 hours. When she finally came, she acted put out, like driving me was some huge inconvenience. Sorry this is so long, but writing it all out makes me realize just how insane it is that I've been tolerating this. I feel like such a doormat. Yesterday, she called me in desperation again, asking if I could watch the boys for the evening. I told her I couldn't. As soon as she launched into her usual tirade about how selfish I am, something in me just snapped. I told her to shut up and actually listen for once. If she really thought I was that selfish and awful of a person, then she had two choices: either stop leaning on me so much and spare her kids from my selfishness, or accept that if I keep helping, it won't be for free anymore. And from now on, there'd be no extra favors without compensation. She hung up without saying a word. And once the adrenaline wore off, I was shaking. I hate confrontation, so you can imagine how much that rattled me. The panic set in too, because I realized I might have just lost the last family member I had left. My fiancé, though, said it was long overdue, that I should have stood up for myself a long time ago. Of course, he's biased, since he loves me. I don't really have much of a social circle outside of coworkers, so when all this blew up, I didn't have anyone I could turn to and ask if I just made the biggest mistake of my life. Part of me worries, what if I never see my nephews again? What if I'd just hung on a little longer and she would have eventually backed off? I honestly don't know if I was wrong for giving her that ultimatum. When I posted about it online, some of the responses hit me hard. One person said my sister is deeply irresponsible and selfish at her core. They asked if she was even receiving child support, because if she is, then she should be using that money for daycare or babysitting. And if she's not, then she needs to be pursuing legal action. They reminded me that having kids is a full-time responsibility, not something to pawn off on a sibling. They said I wasn't the problem here. The truth is, I don't really know much about her finances. We don't talk about that kind of stuff, and honestly, I don't even like her that much as a person. The only reason I keep showing up is because of my nephews, plus this weird sense of obligation I feel to hang on to the tiny piece of family I have left. Another comment told me straight up, stop answering her calls. Stand up for yourself. And if I honestly think the boys are living in a neglectful environment, like no food, no stability, or worse, I should call CPS. The hard part for me is that I'm actually a mandated reporter because of my job. I've been trying to pull back and look at the situation from the outside to decide if it crosses that line. But my sister grew up around CPS, so she knows exactly what not to say or do when people are watching. It makes it tricky to prove anything. Someone else asked where the kid's father is in all of this. The truth? I have no idea. When she was pregnant, I asked once, and she blew up at me. I never asked again. Another commenter pointed out that my fear of not seeing the boys again is unrealistic. They said my sister's been taking advantage of me for so long that she's bound to come crawling back. They explained that people like her see pushback as just a temporary obstacle, not a permanent change. They told me the only way her behavior will shift is if mine does. They even suggested laying out clear rules like no guilt tripping, no name calling, no manipulative tactics, and attaching real consequences when she crosses those lines. For example, if she tries to guilt me after I say no, then I could refuse to babysit for a month. The comment also called her out, saying those excuses about her friend's dying mom are likely just a way to buy herself kid-free time. As harsh as that sounded, it made sense. I felt so stupid realizing it, but just last week I'd started to wonder if she'd been lying about the whole friend's mom story. I asked about it casually, and she hesitated a little too long before remembering what I was talking about. Another person asked me what Carlin has done for me lately, like in the last year. And honestly, besides letting me see the boys, the answer is nothing. It stung to admit that. They told me I was being a doormat and needed to start putting up boundaries now before it got even worse. They also assumed I'd want kids with my fiancé eventually, and said there was no way I could keep this up and also raise my own family. But I don't even want kids. I don't want pets either. I just want to live life for myself, freely. After reading through all the replies, I thanked people for their advice. So many of the comments were actually helpful. I told them I was going to sit down, write out some clear boundaries, and even practice how I'd respond to her pushback so I wouldn't freeze up in the moment. A lot of people worried about my fiancé, but he's been solid. He's this quiet, steady presence, kind of like my anchor. If anything, he's been enjoying having some extra time to game while I've been tangled up in my sister's chaos. Still, I know I need to communicate better with him. We're planning to get married in the summer of 2026, and I want us to focus more on us as a couple. Then came the update. Within the first 24 hours of me telling Carlin my ultimatum, I decided not to answer her calls or texts so she could cool off. In that time, she called me 77 times and sent over 100 texts and voice messages. They were all the same theme, calling me a terrible sister, accusing me of abandoning family. With my fiancé's help, I actually sat down and drafted a list of rules I'd be willing to stick to if she ever came around and agreed to my terms. Stuff like, I'd only babysit up to 3 times every 2 weeks, no more than 4 hours at a time. Meals had to be provided. No bath time or bedtime duties. And absolutely no spending my own money. I wanted to be ready, even though it felt unlikely she'd accept it. Not long after, I started getting messages from an unknown number. My fiancé said it looked like one of those apps that let you text anonymously. The messages were basically guilt trips saying I was such a horrible sister for forcing my nephews to watch their mom die alone without Carlin by her side. The language and phrasing felt too familiar though, and I'm pretty sure it was Carlin pretending to be her friend. By Friday, I was feeling overwhelmed, so I talked to my supervisor at work. I asked if it was okay to bring up personal stuff, and she was really supportive. I explained everything and asked if CPS involvement made sense in this case. I don't work directly with kids, so I wanted another perspective. Together, we went ahead and filed a report. My supervisor said it was better to do it, especially since things were escalating and Carlin might retaliate by taking it out on the boys. For now, I've decided to give her a week to cool off before I even think about resuming contact. Depending on what her next messages or voicemails say, I might eventually reply. But if they keep coming in as abusive as they are now, I probably won't answer at all. It tears me up inside, but maybe it's better this way. Maybe the boys will finally get a more stable environment if I'm not around to be used as leverage in her games. On a lighter note, my fiancé wanted me to tell everyone hi and to reassure people that I'm not a total pushover. Apparently, I just turn into one when it comes to Carlin. I've also started looking into counseling through my job because paying out of pocket is just too expensive. Honestly, all the messages and tough love comments I've gotten have been the wake-up call I needed. Somehow, I'd gone blind to just how bad my sister's behavior really was. All I ever thought about was how awful it would feel to lose my nephews. I'll probably post another update if or when I decide to contact her again, depending on how things play out. Some of the comments I received really got me thinking. One person said I wasn't wrong at all, but that I needed to have a serious talk with my fiancé about whether we'd ever be willing to take custody of the boys if it came down to it. They pointed out my sister could easily end up in jail or just walk away from her kids one day, and CPS might remove them. Better to be prepared for that possibility than blindsided. That floored me. My fiancé and I never wanted kids, but the thought of them landing in foster care makes my stomach turn. I told myself we'd have to talk about it as soon as he got home from work. Another person asked the question that still haunts me: why isn't the father involved? Why should I, as a sibling, be carrying such a huge part of parenting when it isn't even my responsibility? They said flat out, if she wasn't ready to be a parent, she never should have had 2 kids. And they're right. The truth is, I don't know who the fathers are. Every time I asked about them back when she was pregnant, she'd fly into a rage, so I dropped it. As far as I know, she hasn't had a serious relationship since high school. To be honest, looking at the boys, I doubt they even have the same dad because they don't look much alike, their skin tones and features are noticeably different. Someone else told me to keep standing my ground and also wished me luck finding counseling, even suggesting churches since some offer therapy for free or cheap. They added that if I ever needed to go no contact with her, they'd completely understand. Another comment warned me to save every single nasty message as evidence. They didn't mince words, called my sister neurotic, abusive, and lazy. Said she just wanted to keep acting like she was 21 and free, instead of being a responsible mother. They reminded me those kids are her responsibility, not mine. It's only Wednesday, but I finally blocked her number. I couldn't take it anymore. I don't even know when she sleeps because the calls and texts were coming every 2 to 4 hours around the clock. I cried after hitting block. It felt like I was cutting myself off from my nephews. But I was exhausted. My fiancé has been checking her messages twice a day just in case something important comes through. So far, it's just been her cursing at me, calling me names, rambling nonsense. Nothing worth reading. I haven't heard anything official from CPS yet. For a quick update, my fiancé actually unblocked her for a few hours to see if she was still spewing the same garbage. She was, no surprises there. On the other hand, CPS did call me back. They wanted more details, specific dates, actual proof. So I sent them screenshots, piles of them. I even chose to put my name on the report because I felt like it made it more credible. Plus, a part of me felt like I owed it to the boys not to hide. Of course, that also means Carlin now knows for sure I was the one who reported her, and I'll probably face the fallout from that. I also had my first Zoom session with a psychologist through work. Honestly, it was great. She even gave me homework on setting boundaries, which feels fast, but she explained they only get 5 sessions to work with us, so they need to move quickly. Other than that, the only contact I've had with Carlin has been through those abusive messages. I'm ashamed to admit I've driven by her house a couple of times, just to check if things looked normal. They did. My fiancé and I had that talk after someone suggested we might have to foster the boys. And the truth is, we won't. We've been on the same page about not wanting kids from day one, and nothing's changed. The idea of day-to-day family life with children sounds miserable to both of us. We don't even want pets. If we were forced into that role, we'd probably grow bitter and lose ourselves completely. So for now, I don't think there's much more to update. If I ever do resume contact with Carlin, I'll let people know. But honestly, at this point, I don't even think she'd read a single word I wrote back. She's too wrapped up in her own insults. Then came update 3. Today was my birthday. I turned 30. Yay, I guess. It was just a regular workday. When I got home, Carlin was waiting outside my place. My fiancé wasn't home yet. She congratulated me, and for a moment she actually seemed normal. But the second I didn't fall back into my usual role, hovering over her, asking how I could help, she got irritated. She came right out and said she'd always known I never really loved the boys. According to her, I was just jealous that I didn't have kids of my own, and my plan was to make her kids love me more, falsify reports to CPS, and then steal custody from her. I actually laughed when she said it because it sounded so absurd. I told her the truth, that I don't even want kids, and I wouldn't take hers even if someone handed them to me. Maybe it was harsh, but at that point, I was too drained to sugarcoat anything. That only set her off more. She shouted about how devastated the boys would be when they learned I'd abandoned them, as if that somehow proved I never loved them. I realized I couldn't win. So instead of arguing, I asked her why she had even come and where the boys were. She snapped that their whereabouts weren't my business, and said she was only there to tell me I'd never see them again. Honestly, I'd already braced myself for that possibility, maybe even expected it, so I barely reacted. My lack of emotion just seemed to fuel her rage. She lunged like she wanted to grab me, but I'd kept a good 6 feet between us. I bolted inside the building and let the automatic lock click shut behind me. She followed to the door, so I yelled through it that I'd call the police if she didn't leave. She kicked the door once, then stormed off without another word. I made it to my apartment and sat right down on the floor. My hands were shaking too badly to even write, so I recorded a voice memo on my phone, just in case I needed to give everything to the police or a lawyer later. After 20 minutes of just breathing and trying to calm down, I heard the lock rattle again. My heart jumped into my throat until I realized it was just my fiancé getting home from work. When he found me still sitting on the floor, he was terrified. I told him everything. He said we needed to file a police report and also update CPS about how erratic Carlin had become. I felt torn because part of me still felt guilty about reporting her, especially since our own childhood was way worse and nobody ever reported our parents. But he asked me straight out, if this were happening to another family at my job, would I report it? And I had to admit I would. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake worrying about calling the police the next day, wondering what to tell CPS, trying to piece together everything in my head. At least CPS had already given us the name and contact info of their caseworker earlier in the week, so at least the process wouldn't be a mystery. Update 4 came after I kept busy taking extra shifts at work to distract myself from missing the boys. I haven't seen them or heard from them since the night Carlin came to my door and kicked it. CPS has checked in a few times, but since my fiancé and I told them we wouldn't take the boys, not even short-term, they stopped sharing details with us. I get it. We're outsiders now. There's a family court date scheduled for next month. We debated asking if we could attend, but honestly, I don't think they'd let us. Even if we'd agreed to foster, family court here is usually very closed off. I've had to accept the reality that I may never see my nephews again. My hope is that when they're older, maybe 10 or so, when they have their own phones or social media, I can try to reconnect. It feels like a long way off, but it's something to hold on to. Up until CPS stopped updating us, it sounded like they were leaning toward at least a temporary foster placement. Carlin had missed mandatory meetings, dodged calls, and once, when CPS dropped by, she showed up at the house without the boys. They realized the kids had been left home alone while she was gone. She claimed she just dropped something off on the next street and was only away for a few minutes, but I doubt it, and apparently, so did CPS. They even contacted me to ask if I knew where she was or how long she'd been gone, but by then, I'd already cut off communication. As for why we can't take the boys, a lot of it comes down to practicality. I have a chronic illness, and my fiancé uses a wheelchair. We live in a one-bedroom apartment, and squeezing in beds and kid stuff would make the place impossible for him to navigate. More than that, though, we simply don't want kids. We've been clear about that from the very beginning of our relationship. I don't think I'd make a great parent, and it wouldn't be fair to expect my fiancé to take on something he never wanted either. I just hope the boys are young enough that CPS can place them somewhere safe and stable, whether that's short-term or permanent. It breaks my heart, but I know forcing ourselves into that role would destroy us. Thanks to everyone who sent well wishes or asked questions. This whole thing has been a nightmare, but at least I don't feel as alone as I once did.